It is a very strange sensation to an experienced youth to feel itself quite alone in the world, cut adrift from every connection, uncertain whether the port to which it is bound can be reached, and prevented by many impediments from returning to that it has quitted. The charm of adventure sweetens that sensation, the glow of pride warms it, but then the throb of fear disturbs it. And fear with me became predominant when half an hour elapsed and still I was alone. I bethought myself to ring the bell. "Is there a place in this neighborhood called Thornfield?" I asked of the waiter who answered the summons. "Thornfield? I don't know, ma'am. I'll inquire at the bar." He vanished, but reappeared instantly. "Is your name Eyre, miss?" "Yes. Person here waiting for you." I jumped up, took my muffined umbrella, and hastened into the inn passage. A man was standing by the open door, and in the lamplit street I dimly saw a one-horse conveyance. "This will be your luggage, I suppose," said the man rather abruptly when he saw me, pointing to my trunk in the passage. "Yes." He hoisted it onto the vehicle, which was a sort of car, and then I got in. Before he shut me up, I asked him how far it was to Thornfield. "A matter of 6 miles. I wonder if she lives alone except this little girl. If so, and if she is in any degree amiable, I shall surely be able to get on with her. I will do my best." It is a pity that doing one's best does not always answer. At Lowood, indeed, I took that resolution, kept it, and succeeded in pleasing. But with Mrs. Reed, I remember my best was always spurned with scorn. I pray God Mrs. Fairfax may not turn out a second Mrs. Reed, but if she does, I am not bound to stay with her. Let the worst come to the worst. I can advertise again. How far are we on our road now? I wonder. I let down the window and looked out. Millcote was behind us, judging by the number of its lights. It seemed a place of considerable magnitude, much larger than Lowden. At last he turned in his seat and said, "You're noin' so far fro Thornfield now." Again I looked out. We were passing a church. I saw its low broad tower against the sky, and its bell was tolling a quarter. I saw a narrow galaxy of lights too, on a hillside, marking a village or hamlet. About 10 minutes after, the driver got down and opened a pair of gates. We passed through, and they clashed to behind us. We now slowly ascended a drive, and came upon the long front of a house, contrasting as it did with the darkness to which my eyes had been for 2 hours inured. When I could see, however, a cozy and agreeable picture presented itself to my view. "How do you do, my dear? I am afraid you have had a tedious ride. John drives so slowly. You must be cold. Come to the fire, Mrs. Fairfax, I suppose," said I. "Yes, you are right. Do sit down." And she produced from her pocket a most housewifely bunch of keys, and delivered them to the servant. "Now, then, draw nearer to the fire," she continued. "You've brought your luggage with you, haven't you, my dear?" "Yes, ma'am. I'll see it carried into your room," she said, and bustled out. "Shall I have the pleasure of seeing Miss Fairfax tonight?" I asked, when I had partaken of what she offered me. "What did you say, my dear? I'm a little deaf," returned the good lady, approaching her ear to my mouth. I repeated the question more distinctly. "Miss Fairfax? Oh, you mean Miss Varens. Varens is the name of your future pupil? Indeed, then she is not your daughter. No, I have no family." "But I thought you would like it better than one of the large front chambers. To be sure they have finer furniture, but they're so dreary and solitary. I never sleep in them myself." I thanked her for her considerate choice, and, as I really felt fatigued with my long journey, expressed my readiness to retire. She took her candle, and I followed her from the room. First she went to see if the hall door was fastened. Having taken the key from the lock, she led the way upstairs. The steps and banisters were of oak. The staircase window was high and latticed. The impulse of gratitude swelled my heart, and I knelt down at the bedside and offered up thanks where thanks were due, not forgetting, ere I rose, to implore aid on my further path, and the power of meriting the kindness which seemed so frankly offered me before it was earned. My couch had no thorns in it that night, my solitary room no fears, at once weary and content. I slept soon and soundly. When I awoke it was broad day. The chamber looked such a bright little place to me as the sun shone in between the gay blue chintz window curtains, showing papered walls and a carpeted floor. So unlike the bare planks and stained plaster of low wood, that my spirits rose at the view. Not perhaps that day or that month, but at an indefinite future period. I rose. I dressed myself with care, obliged to be plain, for I had no article of attire that was not made with extreme simplicity. I was still by nature solicitous to be neat. I felt it a misfortune that I was so little, so pale, and had features so irregular and so marked. I thought I should do respectably enough to appear before Mrs. Fairfax, and that my new pupil would not at least recoil from me with antipathy. Having opened my chamber window, and seen that I left all things straight and neat on the toilet table, I ventured forth. Traversing the long and matted gallery, I descended the slippery steps of oak. Then I gained the hall. I halted there a minute. I looked at some pictures on the walls. One, I remember, represented a grim man in a cuirass. And thinking what a great place it was for one lonely little dame like Mrs. Fairfax to inhabit, when that lady appeared at the door. "What? Out already?" said she. "I see you are an early riser." I went up to her, and was received with an affable kiss and shake of the hand. "How do you like Thornfield?" she asked. I told her I liked it very much. "Mr. Rochester," I exclaimed. "Who is he?" "The owner of Thornfield," she responded quietly. "Did you not know he was called Rochester?" Of course I did not. I had never heard of him before, but the old lady seemed to regard his existence as a universally understood fact, with which everybody must be acquainted by instinct. "I thought," I continued, "Thornfield belonged to you." "To me, bless you, child. What an idea! To me, I am only the housekeeper, the manager. To be sure I am distantly related to the Rochesters by the mother's side. I consider myself quite in the light of an ordinary housekeeper. My employer is always civil, and I expect nothing more. And the little girl, my pupil." The equality between her and me was real, not the mere result of condescension on her part. So much the better. My position was all the freer. "Good morning, Miss Adela," said Mrs. Fairfax. "Come and speak to the lady who is to teach you, and to make you a clever woman some day." She approached. "C'est la ma gouvernante," said she, pointing to me, and addressing her nurse, who answered, "Mais oui, certainement." "Are they foreigners?" I inquired, amazed at hearing the French language. "The nurse is a foreigner, and Adela was born on the continent, and, I believe, never left it till within 6 months ago. When she first came here she could speak no English. Now she can make shift to talk it a little. I don't understand her." And as I led her into breakfast, I addressed some phrases to her in her own tongue. She replied briefly at first, but after we were seated at the table, and she had examined me some 10 minutes with her large hazel eyes, she suddenly commenced chattering fluently. "And I was sick, and so was Sophie, and so was Mr. Rochester." Mr. Rochester lay down on a sofa in a pretty room called the salon, and Sophie and I had little beds in another place. I nearly fell out of mine. It was like a shelf. "And Mademoiselle, what is your name?" "Eyre, Jane Eyre." "Eyre, bah, I cannot say it." "Well, our ship stopped in the morning, before it was quite daylight, at a great city, a huge city. And there were many children there besides me, and a pond with beautiful birds in it, that I fed with crumbs." "Can you understand her when she runs on so fast?" asked Mrs. Fairfax. I understood her very well, for I had been accustomed to the fluent tongue of Madame Pirot. "Mamma used to teach me to dance and sing, and to say verses. A great many gentlemen and ladies came to see Mamma, and I used to dance before them, or to sit on their knees and sing to them. I liked it. Shall I let you hear me sing now?" Calls pride to her aid, desires her attendant to deck her in her brightest jewels and richest robes, and resolves to meet the false one that night at a ball, and prove to him, by the gaiety of her demeanor, how little his desertion has affected her. The subject seemed strangely chosen for an infant singer. But I suppose the point of the exhibition lay in hearing the notes of love and jealousy warbled, with the lisp of childhood. And in very bad taste that point was. At least I thought so. Adele sang the consonant tunefully enough, and with the naivete of her age, this achieved, she jumped from my knee and said, "Now, mademoiselle, I will repeat you some poetry." "Was it your mama who taught you that piece?" I asked. "What a beautiful room," I exclaimed, as I looked round, for I had never before seen any half so imposing. "Yes, this is the dining room. I have just opened the window to let in a little air and sunshine." I caught a glimpse of a fairy place. So bright to my novice eyes appeared the view beyond, yet it was merely a very pretty drawing room, and within it a boudoir. "In what order you keep these rooms, Mrs. Fairfax," said I. "No dust, no canvas coverings, except that the air feels chilly. One would think they were inhabited daily. Why, Miss Eyre, though Mr. Rochester's visits here are rare, they are always sudden and unexpected, and as I observed that it put him out to find everything swathed up, and to have a bustle of arrangement. On his arrival, I thought it best to keep the rooms in readiness. Is Mr. Rochester an exacting, fastidious sort of man? Not particularly so, but he has a gentleman's tastes and habits, and he expects to have things managed in conformity to them." "Do you like him? Is he generally liked?" "Oh, yes. The family have always been respected here. Almost all the land in this neighborhood, as far as you can see, has belonged to the Rochesters time out of mind." "Well, but, leaving his land out of the question, do you like him? Is he liked for himself?" "I have no cause to do otherwise than like him, and I believe he is considered a just and liberal landlord by his tenants, but he has never lived much amongst them." "But has he no peculiarities? What, in short, is his character?" "Oh, his character is unimpeachable, I suppose. He is rather peculiar, perhaps. He has traveled a great deal, and seen a great deal of the world, I should think. I dare say he is clever, but I never had much conversation with him." This was all the account I got from Mrs. Fairfax of her employer and mine. There are people who seem to have no notion of sketching a character. Shaded, others, with wrought old English hangings crusted with thick work, portraying effigies of strange flowers, and stranger birds, and strangest human beings. All which would have looked strange, indeed, by the pallid gleam of moonlight. "Do the servants sleep in these rooms?" I asked. "Nor any traditions of one, no legends or ghost stories, I believe not, and yet it is said the Rochesters have been rather a violent than a quiet race in their time, perhaps, though, that is the reason they rest tranquilly in their graves now? Yes, after life's fitful fever they sleep well," I muttered. "Where are you going now, Mrs. Fairfax?" For she was moving away, onto the leads. "Will you come and see the view from thence?" I followed still, up a very narrow staircase to the attics, and thence by a ladder and through a trapdoor to the roof of the hall. I was now on a level with the crow colony, and could see into their nests. All reposing in the autumn day sun, the horizon bounded by a propitious sky, azure, marbled with pearly white. No feature in the scene was extraordinary, but all was pleasing. With its 2 rows of small black doors all shut, like a corridor in some Bluebeard's castle. While I paced softly on, the last sound I expected to hear in so still a region, a laugh, struck my ear. It was a curious laugh, distinct, formal, mirthless. I stopped. The sound ceased, only for an instant. It began again, louder, for at first, though distinct, it was very low. It passed off in a clamorous peal that seemed to wake an echo in every lonely chamber, though it originated but in one, and I could have pointed out the door whence the accents issued. "Mrs. Fairfax," I called out, for I now heard her descending the great stairs. "Did you hear that loud laugh? Who is it? Some of the servants? Very likely," she answered. "Perhaps Grace Poole." "Did you hear it?" I again inquired. "Yes, plainly. I often hear her. She sews in one of these rooms," Sometimes Leah is with her. They are frequently noisy together. The laugh was repeated in its low, syllabic tone, and terminated in an odd murmur. "Grace!" exclaimed Mrs. Fairfax. Grace curtsied silently and went in. "She is a person we have to sew and assist Leo in her housemaid's work," continued the widow, not altogether unobjectionable in some points. "But she does well enough. By the by, how have you got on with your new pupil this morning?" The conversation, thus turned on Adele, continued till we reached the light and cheerful region below. Adele came running to meet us in the hall, exclaiming, "Mesdames, vous êtes servies," adding, "J'ai bien faim, moi." We found dinner ready and waiting for us in Mrs. Fairfax's room.
Alright, this story has come to an end. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you.